Hey, hope you're well. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, more from them a little bit later on. So is there ever a good time, a good reason to make your own DIY Dominos, your own loose tenons? Well, in this video, I'm going to look into that with a little bit of help from this, the new and slightly unusual looking UJK Loose Tenon bit from Axminster Tools. This popped up in my email a couple of months back. I thought it looked interesting. I've certainly never seen anything quite like it. So I pre-ordered it. I paid the 50 quid full asking price, just like any customer would. And it arrived a week or so back. Now, loose tenon bits are nothing new. The Chinese company that made the scary looking bearing guided bit that I tried out last year also make a set of loose tenon bits, though they are much more traditional with just a single cutter size to each shank. The set from the Chinese company is actually more expensive than the UJK bit, but they are also available individually at a little over half the price of the UJK multi-size bit. As ever, you pay as you money and you make your choice. This is one of two loose tenon bits from UJK, and it handles the 4, 5, 6 and 8 millimeter sizes. As you've probably already guessed, the other one does 10, 12 and 14 thick loose tenon stock. Now, it's probably worth pointing out here that whilst I'm referring to these as loose tenon bits, they don't actually make the loose tenons for you. They just round over the edges, which brings us to the first sticking point with DIY Dominos. You really have to be quite well set up with a decent amount of gear to be able to work precisely if you actually want to do this. There's lots of ways you could get a 6 millimeter thick stock that's 19 millimeters wide. Table saws, bandsaws play in a thicknesser, but it's not the kind of thing you can do easily with, say, just a track saw. And you do need to be properly precise. A loose tenon that's closer to 5 mil thick in a 6 millimeter mortise will be loose in a way that you don't normally intend. So for the purposes of this video, I'm basically going to cheat. I've got some 6 millimeter Stripwood and I'm going to rip it down to size on the bandsaw and then run it through the UJK bit at the router bench. As said before, I've never seen a router bit quite like this. It reminded me of the stacked cutters that you sometimes see on spindle molders, but it is perfectly safe to use. Obviously, it can't be bearing guided with all the different sized cutters on it, so you do need to set it up against a fence. And once you're set up for the size that you're using, the other sizes will either be below the bench or safely out of harm's way. I've set the height of the 6mm cutter so that it just covers the Stripwood, and then set the fence against the middle of the 6 millimeter roundover using a thin metal filler knife packed off the bench on some 3 millimeter plywood to get it as close to the center of the cutter as I can. I don't want to get my fingers anywhere near this, so it's featherboards and push sticks all around, and I can get some lengths of 6 millimeter loose tenon stock made, each one feeding through twice to round over both edges. So that's all worked out pretty nicely. The bits cut really well as you'd expect a 50 quid router bit to cut, with no issues whatsoever. And obviously making standard size loose tenons makes very little financial sense, especially if you're buying Stripwood to do it. But there are a couple of circumstances where it could be useful, and I'll show you those shortly. I need to get some bits of board cut up for the demo. And while that happens, let me tell you about this video sponsor, that's Skillshare. This time of year, even though the days are drawing out, the nights are still pretty chilly, and getting into the workshop can take some real commitment. Maybe instead of staying on the sofa watching TV, why not spend that time productively learning new skills or taking a refresher course on something you've been meaning to brush up on? Skillshare's impressive range of online courses covers just about anything and every kind of creative endeavor you can think of. Video editing, cooking, graphic design, and yes, my personal favorite, 3D modeling CAD software. Now, while I have finally settled on Shaper 3D, a CAD package that actually makes sense to me, it's still been incredibly helpful to be able to take detailed courses. This one is Shaper 3D Create Your First Model by Nicholas Fogg, especially knowing that each course hasn't cost me anything extra. And the Skillshare learning paths, course playlists, if you like, that have been carefully curated to work together, those learning paths make finding those courses on related topics even easier. So whether you're a complete beginner like me, or someone with more experience just looking to get a specific answer to a specific question, then you'll certainly find something for you on Skillshare. But the best part is you don't have to take my word for it. The first 500 people to click on the link in the video description will get a month's free trial on Skillshare to watch whatever you want, take as many courses as you like, attend as many classes as you can fit in to see if it's for you. And if you want to continue after the trial, then there are great value premium subscriptions available too. So whether you're looking to learn more about something you already have an interest in or looking to learn new skills altogether, Skillshare will have something to help you out, and I'd like to thank Skillshare for helping me out by sponsoring this video. So I said before that it didn't seem to make a lot of financial sense to make your own loose tenon, certainly not in standard sizes, and obviously your mileage may vary. But back in my fitted furniture days, 99% of the time I was using 5x30 dominoes. Just the price of this UJK bit alone will buy you at least 1,000 5x30 dominoes, maybe even more if you shop around. But what if you're making something where a standard sized domino just won't do? Maybe you want something a little longer. That was the first time I made my own dominoes, way back early on. And long before I started on YouTube, I was making a small set of open shelves for a kid's bedroom, and I wanted to connect the uprights either side of a horizontal shelf. A longer loose tenon in an otherwise standard size was the answer. This one is 6x68, I think. So you have 25mm in each upright and the central shelf of 18mm thick as well. So that's worked really well, though. It's worth pointing out that if you were a Domino XL user, you'd have the option to purchase lengths of domino stock from Festool, something that they don't offer for the smaller domino sizes. And whilst there are alternative loose tenons from other manufacturers, I looked at the trend range a little while back. As far as I'm aware, nobody actually offers pre-machined lengths of loose tenon stock available in the smaller sizes. If you do know of anybody who offers this commercially, then please do let me know in the comments, as I'll be interested to hear about it. Well, how about if you wanted a wider loose tenon than those that are commercially available? This has been something that's been talked about online ever since the Festool Domino was introduced around 20 years ago. The Domino 500 can cut standard, mid-sized and wide mortises. Why not offer loose tenons in those widths as well? Well, who knows, but nobody seems to. To be fair, I've only used them a couple of times, both times on glazed doors with narrower than usual rails and stiles. The rebate for the glazing doesn't help. There's obviously no panel groove to make use of either, and the available space would be very tight for two smaller loose tenons side by side. The answer for me was a 29mm wide by 50mm long loose tenon, much like the one that I've just made. Now, obviously, you don't automatically get the wiggle room that a wider mortise would usually allow, but it's not beyond the wit of man to figure that out and get it done if it's something that you really need. The other reason you might want to make your own dominoes, and it's a reason that came up a lot when the Domino was new, is that if you're working in natural timbers and you want to either match the species of the workpiece or contrast with it, if it's a through domino, maple dominoes in walnut, for example, would look very good, or maybe the other way around with a darker domino in a lighter wood. Looking at the larger Domino XL, I mentioned earlier that you can buy pre-machined lengths of domino stock in 10, 12 and 14mm thicknesses, but Festool also make this available in an exterior grade hardwood called SIPO? I'm not sure how it's pronounced, to be honest. We call it UTEAL here in the UK. I think this is one area where it may start to make financial sense to DIY your own dominoes, as a few lengths of the SIPO UTEAL domino stock costs getting on for 3 times the price of the UJK bit. As always, though, we come back to the means of production. Do you have the planers and thicknesses? Do you have the bandsaw or the table saw to cut the stock accurately? Are you buying the raw materials in, or can you salvage enough decent material, or maybe you can generate enough waste or scrap material to be worthwhile? And is all your gear set up and ready to go so that you can make these efficiently without tying up your machinery or your whole workshop making things that you could just buy commercially? Well, someone who can answer yes to all this is Australian furniture maker Dylan Barfield, who's done a video about exactly that. I'll link it up down below. And a quick shout out, thanks so much to Paul in the 10-Minute Workshop forums for finding Dylan's channel. Dylan does some lovely work, he's got a great channel, and is definitely somebody to watch. But he is a furniture maker by trade, so he generates a lot of scrap material. He has a full complement of heavy-duty cast iron machinery that lets him crank out loose tenon stock quickly and easily, and he used the bits supplied by Find by Tool, the Chinese company that I mentioned previously, who made my scary looking router bit from last year. And by the way, those domino bits also have a glue relief slot in the roundover, something that has to be said the UJK bits don't. And which brings us neatly to the final elephant in the room. You see, those rounded edges of the dominoes, they don't really do that much. They fill all the available space in the mortise. Of course, essential for a good-looking through domino, but put a standard width domino, and all commercial loose tenons are made to the narrowest width, remember. Put a standard width domino in a mid-size or widest mortise, and those rounded edges ain't going to touch the sides. That's the genius of the Festool domino. You can have a looser fitting tenon with a little bit of wiggle room during the glue up without compromising the strength of the joint, because the strength of the joint comes from the flat glue area on the loose tenon faces, not from the round edges. And if that's the case, then what's the point of these bits, really? I mean, I've no skin in this game. I've bought the bit, the money is spent, but the times I've made my own loose tenons, I always just beveled the edges slightly with a hand plane just to get a bit more meat into the mortise. And sure, if I'd had one of these bits at the time, I probably would have used it. But I've got to be honest, I can't quite square it in my head as to whether it's a good idea or not, or whether I'd just be better off spending the cost of this bit on a box of 5x30 dominoes. But that's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, but I'll call this one done for now. Thanks so much for taking a look. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll catch you next time. All right, take care.